My name is Derek. I'm an author, landscape and wildlife photographer. Photography's been a hobby throughout my life, but I never really knew what kind of photographer I was. I never really knew what I wanted to take pictures of until I started writing hiking guides for my publisher, Countryman Press. So now that I've been a part-time semi-professional photographer for about a decade, reflecting on what photography teaches you made me realize that it really does shape how you see the world and even how you interact with the world. Um, Photography is a very accessible hobby. I'd say it's probably one of the most accessible hobbies in the world today, considering that everyone basically walks around with a camera in their pocket all the time. I mean, essentially everyone is a photographer today. Not that everyone thinks about themselves as a photographer, and not that everyone even thinks of it as a hobby. It's almost so ubiquitous that people probably don't even stop to think about what they're doing as photography. But when you do see yourself as a photographer, when you start to look at the world the way that a photographer looks at the world, it actually has some really serious benefits to your life, to your mental health, to your philosophy and ability to take new perspectives. So in this video, I wanted to explore 10 of the ways that photography has changed how I see the world, 10 of the ways that it's benefited me and my life, and ways that photography can enhance your experience as just a human being. You'll probably notice a theme throughout the video here, throughout these 10 points. So my first kind of lesson from photography is what I'll call compositional vision. Photography quite literally reframes how you see the world. It's probably not too much of an exaggeration to say that photographers, maybe this is just me, I don't know. If other photographers want to chime in and comment below, if this applies to you or if I'm just a crazy person, please feel free to share what this is like for you. But I have found myself over the last 10 years sort of seeing the world as if there's the rectangular photo frame superimposed over whatever I'm looking at. Not all the time and not too literally. I mean, I'm not literally imagining a rectangular frame, in my vision. But as a sort of focus mechanism, as a sort of way to concentrate your vision, my method as a landscape and wildlife photographer is that I'm walking around, hiking, just hiking as I normally would hike, and I'm paying much closer attention to the world around me. Not just the view, not just the vista, not just the Instagram-worthy vista point at the middle or the end of the hike, however you want to think of it. But when I'm walking through the woods, I find myself scanning the world around me and paying attention in a way that I just never did before. And that is something that I think is really good to grow. I mean, just one of the main themes of this channel, one of the main themes of videos that I want to work on is this sort of attentional awareness. The world we live in today is challenging our ability to pay attention in so many ways, and anything you can do to fight back against that, I think, is incredibly worthwhile. Anything that nudges you to pay closer attention to the world around you, to actually see versus just drifting through life, to actually see what's around you, which we just really don't anymore, I think. I think we are kind of like becoming blind. I don't want to sound hyperbolic. I don't want to sound, like some kind of doom and gloom exaggerator. But I mean, tell me if you feel differently. Chime in here if you're not concerned about this, or if you think I'm overblowing it. But I really do think like we are losing our ability to pay attention. We are kind of becoming blind. So having this vision that you can adopt, this way of seeing the world that calibrates you, like literally calibrates you into paying attention. I'm starting out with this because I think this is invaluable. As a photographer, you learn to chase light. Photography is all about light. Photography is, painting with light, capturing light. Photographers learn to value, in particular, the warmth of golden hour. That's like an hour or two before sunset, an hour or two after sunrise. You realize how important light is, the contrast that light creates, how important it is to beauty. Once you can appreciate beauty on kind of a fundamental level, that's probably a little more philosophical than I have the space to get into here. There's future videos where I'll get into this in a little more depth. But similar, again, to number one, just being able to appreciate what enhances the beauty of the world around you. This sounds mundane, but it's also a direct benefit to your life. Literally, you enjoy the world more. The world looks more beautiful. Who doesn't want that, right? As a photographer, you start paying attention, you start noticing the shifts in light throughout the day because you have to. As a landscape photographer, you can't just hike at any arbitrary time. If I didn't enjoy hiking alone, I would have had to start enjoying hiking alone, because when people normally want to go for a hike in the middle of the day is the absolute worst time for landscape photography. But paying attention to this, being very mindful of all these subtle shifts of light throughout the day force you as a photographer and remind you as just a person to pay closer attention, to just be in the world more. Embracing the perspective, the mindset, the philosophy, whatever you want to call it, of a photographer just helps to keep you more grounded in the world around you. So for number 4, seasonal awareness, similar to time awareness, but on a greater scale, you become attuned to yearly cycles. When I first really started noticing this was when I was formulating the concept I had for what became The Joy of Winter Hiking, my most recent book, which is about getting out in the winter and being able to appreciate getting out in the winter more. And it's got all these how-tos and tips and all that. But the theme of the book is that we're kind of naturally afraid of winter. It's more intimidating than hiking in the summer. But getting outside in the winter, has enormous benefits for your mental health. And I have other videos on that if you go back to my channel. But I started to notice directly because of photography, thinking about the golden hour, sunset, those things that I just talked about. Literally, you just have to pay attention to when those occur. Because, hopefully you know this, but they change throughout the year. The sun sets at a different time throughout the year. Everyone hates that feeling of getting outside from work and it's already dark out. Like, that sucks for everyone. Everyone hates that. Everyone hates having a job where you never see the sun. So anytime you can get outside and see the sun in winter is just, that's a win. And so you start paying attention to when that actually is as a photographer. And I had realized that I just wasn't as a non-photographer. You forget about those things. Life just becomes, this kind of samey day after day after day, doing your things, going to work, blah, blah, blah. You don't think about it. As a photographer, you do think about it. And therefore you start to notice it. Therefore you start to pay attention. And therefore you start to enjoy it because you seek it out. Not just for photography, but, for just your own enjoyment as a human that needs to see sunlight. So in January and February, that is like, you really lock in to when that is. And when it starts to, when the sun finally starts to set at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 6:30, that feels great. This one's a big one for me. I am a massive, massive introvert. I really, really enjoy hiking alone. I know that probably makes me sound like a complete weirdo to a lot of people, but hey, whatever. That's how I am. I'm super introverted, and it is what it is. It's just who I am. So I didn't always really understand this about myself, and oddly enough, or maybe not oddly, I guess this makes sense, but photography and hiking are really what made me comfortable with this. Like learning this lesson about myself and becoming comfortable with it. is thanks to photography and thanks to hiking. When I was working on America's Best Day Hikes, a book that I've been showing throughout this video, I made a road trip around the country. I spent 4 months living in my car, out of my car. And for 4 months, I was just driving around by myself, barely ever talking to anyone. You know, I've talked to people on the trail. My mom would call, check in to see how I was doing, of course, as moms do. And otherwise, you know, I would go days with really no conversations with another human being. And at the start of it, you know, the initial impression was like, oh, this is depressing, I guess. Like, oh, I'm going to be alone for 4 months. Like, you know, just culturally, you would see that as like, well, that's going to be depressing, right? And so I just had that cultural perspective on my own experience until about halfway through it. I mean, I had a number of experiences that I don't have time to go into in depth here. I'll maybe elaborate on those particular experiences some other time, some other place. But I had a number of experiences that I probably would not have had if I was traveling with another person. And a number of experiences that were really unique to being able to travel like that alone. The freedom that came with being able to just basically set my own schedule for each and every day. And, you know, halfway through that trip, I realized, oh, I love this. This is so appealing to who I fundamentally am as a person. I love this. It felt like I suddenly gave myself permission to enjoy all the time I spent alone. I didn't have to feel bad or guilty about it. I love hiking alone. And early in my life, I had this instinct that like, well, that's weird though. You know, you got to ask friends. You got to wait till you ask friends that are available, and you know, friends can go hiking with you, because it's, again, that's like the cultural norm. And without photography and without hiking, I don't think I really would have embraced how true that was for me. Number 6. So finding a special hike, a special trail, a special landscape in ordinary locations near your house. I think this is one of the simplest and easy things you can do as a photographer to just derive more regular enjoyment from the world around you. Instagram in the 2010s, I feel like skewed photographers in particular, but you know, kind of all of us, because we were all participating in that culture. I think it skewed what we considered, you know, a photogenic landscape to, you know, if you live in the United States, like every Instagram influencer is taking these pictures in Washington and Oregon and Colorado and British Columbia and, you know, places like that, you know, it's great if you live near those places. It's great if you live in the West Coast near a really cool national park. But a lot of people don't. I don't. I live in the Hudson Valley of New York. I love the mountains near me. I live in the Catskill Mountains, and they're incredible. But a lot of the photographic opportunities in the landscape here are not those big epic vistas. The mountains here just, you know, as incredible as they are, as incredible as the hiking is, they don't necessarily translate so easily into those super epic, stunning photos that were so popular on Instagram. Here you have to look for more intimate scenes. You have to look for small scale shots. And you also start to pay attention to the wildlife. Even wildlife, you know, as ordinary as a squirrel, once you actually start paying attention to squirrels, you realize they are the most hilarious animal on the planet. And go back a few videos, I made a whole video about that. Squirrels are so freaking funny. I know I sound like an insane person, but it's a hill I am willing to die on. Find an ordinary park near you. This applies to anyone. I mean, again, everyone's a photographer now, right? Like everyone has a camera in their pocket. Intentionally go out and find a trail or a park near you that is mundane, that's boring, that's easily overlooked. Like intentionally look for one that is seemingly forgettable in the culture we're in today. And explore that area, explore that park, get to know that trail. And maybe it just has a cool rock formation. Maybe there's a bunch of hilarious squirrels there. Whatever it is about it, Get to know a place that is boring and find what there is to appreciate about it, because there's something. There's many things. Applying the mindset of a photographer to the world around you is going to make navigating this crazy, insane, can't even tell what's real anymore world maybe not easy, but easier. We are living in a world that wants us to be constantly distracted and unable to focus on anything. So having a hobby that teaches you how to focus and how to see things from new perspectives, in a world where you can barely tell what's even real anymore, being able to apply this mindset and just having that reminder to apply this mindset to everything you experience on a daily basis, I think it's obvious how helpful that is. The funny thing with landscape photography is that the conditions that make for good landscape photos are not the conditions that most people look for when they want to go out for a hike. Most people want to hike early in the afternoon, get back to the car, before sunset, before it gets dark. And people even pass you on the trail, and they'll see your big, fancy, presumably expensive camera, and they'll say, you must be getting some great photos, and you kind of have to go, oh, yeah, sure. It's, it'd be better if it was cloudy. A clear, bright, cloudless, sunny day, early in the day at least, it is actually not good conditions for landscape photography. You are, when people say that, is actually usually one of the worst times for landscape photography, and you are not, in fact, getting good photos at that time. But this is, of course, a benefit of photography. This is one of the things that I've really come to appreciate that photography taught me, is that, you don't have to focus. And in fact, for good photography, you really shouldn't focus on what are just the classically nice days. Some of my absolute favorite days for photography are the super cloudy atmospheric days when there's just clouds drifting around the mountains, not actively raining, but threatening rain, and clouds, just moving and dancing around. Absolutely love conditions like that. And then, of course, there's winter, and this is something that I feel so strongly about that I just wrote and released an entire book about it, The Joy of Winter Hiking. People are afraid of winter. People hate winter. I mean, just the animosity with which I hear people talk about winter. I mean, a lot of these revelations that you have revelations when you realize, you were that way too, and then you start to see things differently. And there was just one winter when I bought a pair of micro spikes and I started getting outside more, and I realized how much of a massive improvement on my mental health it was to see the sun in winter, to be able to get outside. But it makes such a huge difference. And hiking in the winter, I mean, I can't spoil the whole book. Obviously, I really sincerely would love if you checked it out, because it's something I feel very strongly about, and something that I think a lot of people could use to improve their lives. I mean, it's just an entire season that you can grasp and crack open and enjoy the benefits of, that people are just, we look at it as the season where you have to hunker down inside and light some candles and throw on a sweater and get as cozy as possible and just cower in the darkness for 4 months. We have this retreat mentality rather than a go out and get 'em mentality. If you can learn to enjoy the winter, it's truly life-changing. It's a hard season no matter what, but hiking and photography in the winter can be absolutely stunning. So as a photographer, I mean, this one's going to be complicated, and this is another point that maybe I'll have to elaborate on in greater depth in a future video. But as a photographer, especially when you're on a road trip, but even when you're just hiking around the area where you live, because you're paying attention to details in a way that, well, I covered in, several of my other points here, you also sort of put the pieces of nature together, and you begin to realize how varied nature is, how connected everything is, how alive the world around you is. I mean, just think about how most people go through the world. You wake up in your house, you're not seeing the world outside you really, other than maybe your lawn or the woods behind your house or whatever. And you get in your car and you drive to work, and you don't see anything, really outside your car if you're, paying attention to the road and trying to not get into an accident. We pass through the world in these metal boxes. We're not really seeing the world around us as we drive. We go to work, we see whatever's at work, and most of us don't work in nature anymore. And then you go home and you probably stare at a screen for a few hours, or most people do anyway. That begins to infiltrate all of your experiences in life. So that I think when a lot of people, even when they go out for a hike, they're not really seeing the world around them. They're again, that Instagram mindset of you get to the viewpoint and there's a cool vista there, and you probably take a picture for Instagram, get a selfie or whatever, have a snack, and you head back. Are you seeing the world along the trail? Are you really seeing the whole connected piece, or are you just seeing a piece of it? Photography, if you're really trying to hike with the intention of capturing the world around you as it is, it forces you to pay attention all of the time. It forces you to be hyper open to whatever detail might emerge at any given time. And so you're starting to kind of build up this mental map of nature and the world around you as something much more real, much more tangible, and much more exciting and engaging than I think our culture typically, the perspective our culture typically gives is the exact opposite of that. Finally, I mean, when you apply all of these, when you hike, or even if you're an urban photographer, I mean, this doesn't just apply to nature, but everything is nature. So, whether you're like me, you're hiking through the woods and you're seeing, nature as most people understand it, or, nature as it exists even in our urban and suburban areas. When you're walking around applying all these perspectives that I've been talking about, you're getting free entertainment. You're getting free therapy. You're getting a free mental health boost. You're getting free stress relief. You're getting free anxiety reduction. These things ordinarily, they're things that we spend enormous amounts of money on. And photography, I mean, it's not the only way, and you don't need to have a camera on you. But with or without a camera, photography can teach you these perspectives and therefore give you these benefits, the stress relief, the mental health, the mental health boost, the free entertainment and satisfaction and enrichment that you get from being more engaged in the world, and the entertainment value of nature, the hilarity of squirrels, the beauty of sunset, the beauty of winter. The whole reason I wrote The Joy of Winter Hiking was the idea that being able to get outside in winter and really truly just appreciate your surroundings, appreciate the things that there are to appreciate in winter. It is, I think anyone would agree, it would always be better to enjoy winter versus hating winter and being miserable for 4 months of the year. And why would you not choose the option to enjoy winter as much as possible? And so on a broader scale, photography can teach you to derive enjoyment from the world around you as much as possible. And did I say basically for free?